Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take your sources, really dig in, and pull out the key insights so you can be genuinely well informed. Today, we're looking at a piece from the Bhavana blog. It's called Cultivating Inner Wisdom to Withstand the Flood, Part 1, and it's by Tony Zampella. And we're tackling something super relevant today, how our modern world, especially technology, is, messing with our minds, our focus, even our sense of meaning. This article gives a pretty powerful diagnosis and hints at a way forward. So have you ever felt just swamped by information, drained by all the demands, or maybe disconnected even though you're technically connected all the time? If that sounds familiar, well, this deep dive is for you.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating, I think, is the author's approach. Tony Zampella, he's a wisdom coach who designs contemplative learning programs. And he doesn't just frame this as a tech problem. He sees it as something much deeper, a crisis of meaning. His perspective is interesting because it brings in wisdom traditions from outside the typical Western view. In fact, he actually argues that some aspects of Western thought have sort of, well, paved the way for the situation we're in now.
Okay, so building on that, he starts with this really striking observation from his coaching work, looking back about, a decade? He noticed this pattern emerging. Clients were showing up drained, fragmented, and deeply distracted, just fundamentally off-kilter. And he links it pretty directly to technology, things like cognitive load, sensory overload, definitely decision fatigue, hyperconsumption, and of course, misinformation. The huge one. But it wasn't just stress. He says they were completely spent. Like the coaching sessions had to start with just helping them become present again before they could even think about their goals. It became a space to reconnect, to hear that inner voice. Makes you think, right? If individuals are feeling this intensely, what's happening on a bigger scale?
That's exactly where Zampella goes next. He saw pretty quickly these weren't just isolated cases, they were symptoms of something much larger, a broader societal crisis, as he puts it. He describes it as this relentless wave of uncertainty, fragmentation, and anxiety. Sounds familiar, right? And while there are tons of solutions being thrown around, he believes a lot of the conversation is missing a crucial element, the role of consciousness.
Yeah.
He really emphasizes that to navigate this flood, we need a much deeper grasp of the intersection of information, truth, power, and awareness. So it's way beyond just managing notifications. It's about understanding ourselves.
Right, consciousness as the missing link. So how did we end up here, where being drained and fragmented feels almost like the default? Well, the author asks us to look at how two major Western models of reality have shaped our habits, our perception. He uses that great analogy, we are the fish in the water asking, what water? We don't even see it. The first one he talks about is the mechanistic worldview. This was dominant really from the 1880s up to the 2000s. Think steam engines, factory systems, mass production. It was all driven by mechanistic thinking. So reductionism, predictability, control. That was the name of the game. Humans needed to think sequentially in processes, systems, all for optimization. The key skill, the critical capacity, was logical thinking for predictable results. And the impact? Well, people were often seen as cogs in the system, focus on roles, functions, emotional, subjective stuff, minimized.
Yeah, function over feeling. And that sets the stage perfectly for the next big shift, the digital worldview, roughly 1990s to now. Kicked off by the information age, computer chips, the internet. And its core is really information management and knowledge sharing. Here, the critical faculty shifts to the intellect. Collecting data, organizing it, information literacy, that becomes paramount, the impact now. Humans are increasingly seen as data points. Our experiences get mediated through digital tools, which can lead to this detachment from the physical world, with virtual identities becoming more prominent. But here's the really insightful bit. Zampella argues that these two worldviews, combined, they focus almost exclusively on external stimuli, first the material, then the informational, and it kind of reduces us to just stimulus-response beings. And the paradox he points out is pretty stark. The digital worldview was supposed to help us connect, move past that rigid mechanistic thinking, but instead it's been optimized in a way that actually creates the conditions of this flood of the sea. And he puts it so bluntly, humanity is drowning in information and starving for meaning.
Wow. Drowning in information, starving for meaning, that just nails it, doesn't it? So from that diagnosis, he then breaks down the specific ways this crisis shows up, the symptoms we might recognize in our own lives. And maybe as we go through these, you listening can sort of check off how many feel familiar. He starts with how it hits our attention and patience. This drive for instant gratification leading to a shortened attention span makes us impatient, right? Hard to engage with anything deep or complex. I mean, he even mentions college students struggling to read deeply anymore. That ties into FOMO, the fear of missing out. That constant pressure keeps us compulsively checking things. And then there's tech dependency and anxiety, that low-level panic when your phone dies or isn't right there.
Exactly. And it's not just our individual focus, it really reshapes our social world, too. Think about echo chambers and polarization. Algorithms feeding us what we already believe, making real dialogue harder and harder. Then there's social comparison and anxiety, those perfectly curated online lives making everyone else feel inadequate. It's relentless. And oh boy, the huge issue of misinformation, disinformation, and the erosion of trust. It's getting so hard to know what's reliable. And that chips away at trust in media, institutions, even relationships, democracy itself, leads to real social disconnection.
Yeah, that trust erosion is massive. And finally, he talks about how it messes with our very sense of reality and our well-being, like the on-demand expectations blurring work and life, constant pressure leading straight to burnout, difficulty just disconnecting, and curation and validation, this need to share everything, always seeking that online validation instead of just living authentically. He also hits on decision paralysis from information overload. Too many choices, too much data, leads to fragmented decisions, overwhelm, stress. It's exhausting. Then there's surveillance and the erosion of privacy. We sort of accept data collection now, but it can feel powerless. And maybe the creepiest one. An altered sense of reality. AR, VR blurring the lines. Screens making real life seem less vivid. It's a weird distortion.
And when you see them all laid out like that, it's quite a picture. What's really powerful is how Zampella connects these symptoms back to what coaches are actually hearing. People saying things like, I get anxious when I look at my to-do list, or I just feel disconnected and powerless. These aren't just surface complaints. They reflect those deeper things you mentioned. Impatience, anxiety, burnout, this fragmented self. And it's backed up by data, too. He mentions an International Coaching Federation survey, the ICF, showing mental health concerns and burnout are way up. Something like 85% of professionals reporting demand for strategies around mental well-being. But here's the crucial point Zampella makes. Reflective practices are good, they're needed, but just treating the symptoms alone is insufficient. He insists, to navigate the flood, we must examine its roots.
Okay, so digging deeper than the symptoms, what are those roots? How does this flood actually work on us? He uses this really strong analogy. Junk information, acting like junk food for the mind. It just depletes us. And he pushes us to question our habits of the mind, seriously question them. Are we constantly consuming stuff that just ramps up fear, anxiety, distrust? Be honest with yourself. What about habits like doom scrolling or perfectionism or constantly switching contexts, never settling into one thing? He calls it an unprecedented assault on our senses. And it drains energy, impairs thinking, creates anxiety. Of course it does. And all these distractions, they limit our ability to recover, mess with sleep, ratchet up stress. He even brings in a Guardian article talking about our natural negativity bias, how we're wired to notice threats, and how that pulls us into these cycles of drama, danger, and fatigue. It just wears us down. You feel that pull sometimes, right?
Absolutely. And this leads to what the author sees as the absolute core of the problem, a crisis rooted in worldview and an assault on consciousness. He's quite clear that just, doing a digital detox or limiting screen time, that's just a band-aid. It doesn't fix the underlying issue. The real problem, he argues, is this transactional, consumption-driven worldview that the digital age has put on steroids. The irony is thick. The very tools meant to connect us often end up making us feel more fragmented, more isolated. And this assault on consciousness, it's happening precisely when, he suggests, humanity is actually expanding its emotional intelligence, its awareness, but the digital world just overwhelms this growth with disinformation and distractions. He actually references Robert Keegan's book from way back in '94, In Over Our Heads. Keegan warned even then that many people weren't ready for a complex, knowledge-driven world. And today, Zampella says, our consciousness is getting flooded with toxic information that distorts the truth and destabilizes our grounding, which raises a really uncomfortable question. Are we just medicating behaviors to cope? Trying to manage the symptom instead of looking at the cravings that drive the addiction to apps and screens in the first place? Because just coping perpetuates the dissatisfaction.
Medicating behaviors instead of addressing the cravings. Yeah, that's a powerful lens. And you can see how this plays out everywhere, reducing so much of life to simple transactions. Right. He uses the example of the Starbucks CEO talking about how their shift to this app-driven assembly line model started to feel really transactional, the feeling. Overwhelming menus, long waits, chaotic handoffs, inconsistency. It just erodes connection, as Zampella puts it. And think about our screens. They're constantly showing us lives that seem better or sometimes worse than ours. He argues this amplifies anger, anxiety, dissatisfaction. It creates this feedback loop of consumption and coping. So we try to escape by consuming more entertainment, more stuff, more information, but it just keeps us trapped in a cycle of craving. His conclusion is pretty sobering. This whole flood keeps us stuck on the surface of life, living a transactional existence, always scaling up, moving fast, avoiding boredom, constantly striving for more, better, better.
And connecting that back to the bigger picture, the meaning crisis, when we lose that depth, we lose quality, purpose, meaningful connections. We lose
Yeah.
the grounding we desperately need, especially in these really volatile times. It really hammers home his point. Breaking free from an app-driven, screen-consuming, transactional world requires more than superficial fixes. It demands a fundamental shift, doesn't it?
It really does. So if superficial fixes aren't enough, what is the path forward according to Zampella? He proposes cultivating inner wisdom. That's the core solution he offers, but he stresses this isn't easy. It requires a real shift in perspective. It means examining those deep-seated assumptions, our water that we swim in. And he sees coaching as a potentially vital place and a space for this work, a space to help people reflect, deepen their consciousness, reconnect with what actually matters to them, to move beyond just being transactional. Coaching, in this view, helps people reframe their whole understanding of success, happiness, progress, stress, wellness, all the big stuff.
Right. And cultivating inner wisdom in this context means we need to clarify what wisdom means beyond the world of information and data. It's an invitation for more introspection to really expand our interior landscape. Zampella introduces 4 domains, areas of being human, that he plans to delve into more. These are actually rooted in Ken Wilber's 4-quadrant model, which is a pretty well-known framework for understanding human experience comprehensively. These domains are, first, waking up, basically expanding our awareness, becoming more present and grounded. Second, growing up, which involves creating space for reflection to broaden our perspectives, see things in new ways. Third is cleaning up. This is about acknowledging and integrating our shadow tendencies, those unconscious patterns that can hold us back. And fourth, showing up, practicing mindful presence, being attuned to what's emerging in the moment. And coaching, he suggests, really supports all of this by cultivating insight. How? Through keen observation, deep listening, and intentional inquiry and dialogue.
Okay, waking up, growing up, cleaning up, showing up. That's a helpful framework. And this leads to his fascinating conclusion about accessing wisdom. He says it, and this is key, accessing wisdom does not require doing or knowing more. That feels counterintuitive today, right? Instead, it involves a willingness to suspend what we know in favor of embracing uncertainty. Wow. He argues that suspending certainty creates space for intuition to surface questions, inviting a deeper connection to truth and immediate inner knowing. So really, cultivating wisdom begins with, I don't know, and being willing to face the obstacles. He wraps up by acknowledging, look, knowledge, competence, skills, they're essential for performance, obviously. But coaching, he believes, is positioned to support that deeper work, building the grounding and the capacity to cultivate wisdom. And that's what leads to genuine resilience and meaning, something beyond just the transactional, tech-driven surface.
Yeah, it's a powerful argument. This whole deep dive into Zampella's digital flood really underscores that the challenge we face isn't just about managing our devices or information streams. It's fundamentally about reclaiming our inner landscape, redefining what it truly means to be well and connected in this era. It's almost like remembering that the deepest source of truth maybe isn't out there in the data flood, but it's actually within us, just waiting to be accessed perhaps when we have the courage to say, I don't know, to that relentless external noise.
So thinking about all this,
Yeah.
what does it mean for you, trying to navigate your own digital world day to day? Maybe the real takeaway, the real aha moment here isn't just spotting the flood, we all kind of feel it, but it's realizing that the most powerful life hack, the ultimate productivity tool, maybe it isn't a new app or another piece of information. Maybe it's the quiet, intentional cultivation of your own inner wisdom. So here's a thought to leave you with. What might you need to suspend or even unlearn to find your own solid ground amidst these constant, overwhelming currents? Thanks for joining us on this.